Hello, welcome to the Planet's Best Practices series. This month's topic is the Windows 10 deployment, best practices for Windows 10 deployments. I want to introduce the team you will be hearing from this morning or today, and I'll ask each one of them to introduce themselves. Karen, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Kemp. I am a project manager with Planet Technologies, and I've helped on a number of implementations, including several Windows 10, and I'm excited about participating in today's webinar.
Ryan, how about you? Ryan, I believe you're on mute.
Yeah, this is Ryan Bonney, and I've been with Planet just for a short time, and I primarily work with training as well as SCCM deployments.
Thank you, Ryan. Jeffrey?
I'm Jeff Mullis. I'm a senior system engineer with Planet Technologies. I've been working with SCCM with Planet for over 2 years now. Done numerous Windows 10 deployments, and I'm happy to be here. So.
Thank you. And Travis?
All right, thanks, Corey. Good morning. I'm Travis Moore. I'm the manager and the lead architect for the Planet Technologies infrastructure team. My background focuses mainly on identity, enterprise messaging, cloud solutions, as well as this Windows 10 deployments through Configuration Manager.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Well, the agenda for the topic or the conversation today will be how to ask right questions about Windows 10 to ensure that there are smooth deployments. Our panel will discuss, based on their experience, the deployments that they've been involved with and some lessons learned and best practices. If you have questions, you can type those into the question module and go to webinar, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of the period. For those of you that are new to Planet or unfamiliar, just a little bit about us. We are the 6-time Microsoft Federal Partner of the Year. We've also won the State and Local Government Partner of the Year 5 times, as well as being a Windows Partner of the Year 5 times. We're one of only 35 managed NSI partners across the United States for Microsoft, so we're one of the key partners for deploying their technologies. Also want to put in a commercial or a little pitch about Evolve 365. It's a new service that Planet has created, and it's a help desk as a service offering specifically around Microsoft Office 365, and it will drive and increase user adoption and help your organizations become more effective. You can learn more about that at o365support.com, and for participating today or viewing the webinar, you'll be able to get a free trial at freetrial.o365support.com. The Windows 10 deployment's key points for our discussion today will be determining what your customers need, what are the best ways to deliver while minimizing the impact, and lessons learned, best practices around testing and deployments. So with that being said, Travis, I'll turn that over to you.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, so this webcast, as Corey mentioned, it's less about the actual technical deployment of Windows 10. It's more around understanding how to determine what the customer actually needs or what they want as far as Windows 10 is concerned, getting it deployed in their environment. Anything specific around their processes, user needs, anything specific around, any departmental processes, those types of topics are what we're going to be covering today. So the first thing we'd like to start with, Corey, if you go to the next slide, please. The approach that we take with a new customer, really what happens is Microsoft typically approaches our team because the customer says, hey, we want to upgrade to Windows 10 for whatever reason. So what we'll do is we'll engage with that customer more at a high level, kind of a pre-sales type of engagement with our VPs and our technical pre-sales engineers. Those types of personnel are involved. And then what we'll do is we'll sit down with them and we'll determine, why is it you're wanting to upgrade to Windows 10? Is this something where you're forced to upgrade due to the end of life of your current OS? Is there a specific feature set that you're looking for? Do you want increased productivity, security, stability, et cetera, those types of things? Or are you just one of those organizations that they like to be leading edge? Regardless of regardless of the answer, what we'll do is we'll take those requirements and then we'll create a custom deployment project based around those needs. From there, what we'll do is, obviously we'll complete the whole contract negotiations and get through all the formal pieces, and then at that point, my team will actually get engaged. The actual technical deployment team will go in and we'll start with performing due diligence, discovery in their environment, determining exactly what they have in their environment, based off of hardware, existing platforms, processes, applications that are installed on the existing operating system, if they have any legacy environments. And, we work a lot with state and local governments. So typically our biggest concerns out there are with any legacy applications that have been deployed in the environment. A lot of them are built in-house, and they may not have current code. So we have to worry most about application compatibility. From there, what we'll do is once we determine we have a good idea of what's in their environment, we'll create a deployment methodology. And this is again determining that kind of that holistic view of their environment. More around, do they need to be upgraded based off department? Do they have 24/7 shops where they can only be upgraded during a certain time? What are their maintenance windows that are associated with this? Once we understand how we're going to deploy it, who's going to be affected, what limitations and constraints we have within the environment from a deployment perspective, then we'll actually get into the technical portion of this. At this point, we'll determine. We'll take a look at their existing deployment platform. So, the normal platform that we're involved with is System Center Configuration Manager. So we'll go through and we'll look at their SCCM environment. We'll perform a full health check on it. We'll ensure that everything is functioning as expected. If it's not, we'll create a remediation list. We'll go through and we'll help fix the environment and get it prepped for Windows 10, because there's minimum requirements with SCCM as far as that's concerned. Once that has been established and we've tested everything end-to-end from their deployment platform perspective, what we'll do is we'll actually go in and we'll start creating the base test image with the customer. So we'll go in, we'll install the Windows 10 or import the Windows 10 WIM, create the task sequences, all of the technical aspects of getting it deployed, and then we'll do a full proof of concept. Proof of concept is really more around just validating the deployment methodologies are they're functioning as expected, and then at that point we'll be debugging anything. So anything in the task sequence that we also need to add in, any sort of OS customizations, driver libraries, custom steps in the task sequence where it has to perform a reboot to uninstall an older version of Office before it can be updated. Those types of updates in the task sequence are really need to occur. Once that's done, then we can go back with the customer and the entire project team, and we can start what we call the pilot deployment. Now, the pilot deployment really is around validating that proof of concept image that we've come out there with. So this is kind of a initial test for the production rollout, if you will. Normally, we would like to roll these out to what we call resilient, the more resilient users in the environment. And at that point, we can actually test the entire deployment plan. So the end user communications, the time, putting systems in maintenance mode, pushing out the images, validating, everything is pushed out as expected. If it's not, go back and work with the project team and determine and debug exactly what needs to be done to ensure that once we roll into production that everything is rolling out as expected. Once the pilot is complete, then what we'll do is we'll schedule with the entire project team the actual production rollout. And again, this is just kind of one of those lather, rinse, and repeat type scenarios where we already have the migration iterations established from our planning session, so we can say, okay, well, today we're going to move HR, we're going to update their 50 machines, and then tomorrow we're going to do finance, and then next we're going to do the IT department and the rest of the general population. At that point, we should have a good, predictable schedule for getting everything pushed out and updated. Once the production deployment is complete and the customer is satisfied, everything is upgraded as expected, what we'll do is we'll have an actual project closeout. So we'll go through post-mortem, lessons learned, both with the customer, and then we'll do an internal one after we've closed out with the customer. And really, this is key because what it does is anything that we've discovered new, there's a undocumented feature, or hey, we ran into this issue with the architecture in this customer's environment that we didn't think about, we add those steps into our discovery process for the next engagement. So another area that we really place major emphasis on is ensuring that we perform a good detailed knowledge transfer to the customer before the end of each engagement. And the reason that we do this is we don't want to engage the customer and then just do the work for them and then walk away and they're left kind of arms in the air, hey, what are we doing here? It's more of we want to ensure that the customer has a full understanding of what it is that we're deploying, why we're deploying it like this, the troubleshooting methodology that goes behind it in case they run into anything, and in the issues, they're going to customize a task sequence and oops, we're getting this strange error. What did we do? What do we need to do to change this and fix it? So again, it's less around getting Windows 10 pushed out there and more around educating the customer themselves and ensuring that they have a full understanding of what tools they have in their environment that they can leverage. All right, Corey, you want to go to the next slide, please?
Share an example.
All right. I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to defer to Jeff. Do you want to give us a good example of a current deployment that you've worked on? Any issues that you may have run into, and just kind of maybe give us a high-level overview, more from a technical perspective.
Currently, there's a few of them I'm working on still. One we've ran into at the current one I'm on right now is they have network authentication, and we discovered along the line that if you have 802.1x network authentication, you have issues trying to get that connected through Windows PE. Contacted Microsoft. That's one of the things that you have to do is to make sure if you're using 802.1x that you have your systems not get no network connectivity if they don't authenticate, but have them go to a separate VLAN so they can at least get imaged. Otherwise, what happens, they don't connect, and then your task sequence will die at that point. You won't be able to get connected anywhere. That's one thing I've noticed right off the bat is that. And other things are making sure when you set your image, make sure it's set at the beginning, so it's not like down the line, all of a sudden we're halfway through deploying, all of a sudden another package wants to be installed, another icon, something else needs to be changed. Oh, they didn't want this uninstalled for modern apps. Try to get that all set up at the beginning so that cannot be changed. Those are some of the issues that we run into, especially if trying to get everything customized properly, and otherwise, some changes down the line make it harder for it to continue on with the whole process.
So on that second example where you have to go back and you have to keep customizing the image, what are some of the things that you can do or advice that you can give a customer or the folks on this call that they can do to prevent having to go back and doing version 1 and 1.1 and 2 and like that, where they have to keep changing that image?
Get buy-in probably from more departments. Make sure all the departments get at least their say in. Because I know we've had one customer where they shielded us a little bit where they were worried about, hey, this icon's, we don't want it on the left side, we want it on the right side, stuff like that. They're not worried about the little things with the image, more about what needs to be installed, what everybody needs to have on their machine, and then where an icon is, or what color something is, or simple things like that.
Okay. All right, thanks for that. So as far as that's concerned, are there a lot of customizations that can be done kind of after the fact, so you can do, say, your base OS push out and then hey, they want to update the system tray to have specific icons in there, or they want this icon on the desktop, or a lot of these things can, I know they can all be handled through task sequence. Is that really the best way to handle it in your opinion?
Yes. The best way I see deploying an image is not making a usually with Windows 7 and XP before that, everybody always created their base image, put all their applications in there, made all their customizations. When you do that, if you ever have down the line, let's say, oh, wait a minute, I need to upgrade this application, or we don't need this one anymore, we need that one. Well, you have to recreate your whole image. You're basically just recreating the wheel all the time. What I always like to do is use the default install win from Windows and then use scripts or packages or applications and then set those up to customize, basically make a branding section where it sets everything up. So that everything is branded at once. So everybody gets the same start layout to begin. Everybody gets the same modern app stream move. So then if you ever down the line, let's say down the line you say, oh, we have this start layout set up. Let's say we got this new application we want to put in the start layout. Well, you change one XML file, add that to your task sequence, and you're done. And you're not sitting there, oh, okay, I got to re-image this machine. Okay, make this change. Now save the image again. Import the image back up. It just saves time for down the line making changes when if any changes happen down the line. So example would even be Office. I've seen some people put Office in their image, and let's say you're at Office 2013, and let's say 6 months down the road you're going to Office 365. Well, then you got to rebuild your whole image, take Office out. Another example would be Adobe Reader. There's updates to Adobe Reader daily. So if you could easily put Adobe Reader as an application or a package, have that do a post-install after the operating system's installed. So down that line, there's also having operating systems and then having a branding section where it sets up the operating system the way you guys like it.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, Jeff, what you're saying is you're taking the OS, just the base OS install, which will be platform agnostic. So it can be to Surface Books, it can be to tablets, it can be to desktops, laptops, anything out there that's going to support the Windows 10 OS. And you're just doing the base install. Obviously, you're going to have the driver library that supports those devices. But then the post-install, you're doing separate task sequences, whether they're based off of a collection or some sort of custom attribute that's saying, okay, if you fall in this group, this the custom branding solution that we're going to give to you. Your icons are going to look like this. These are the applications that you're going to install separate. So like finance folks might have some sort of accounting application that the group in IT won't have. So is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you can easily set up an SCCM where you have collections set up on groups, and then you say if you belong to this group, you get these applications. If you belong to this group, you get these applications. I can do a WMI query for is it a laptop or if it's a desktop, and if it's a laptop, you can say, hey, you gotta get a certain application. I remember back in Windows 7, even XP days, when you deployed laptops, you had to make sure there was no built-in Wi-Fi built into XP, but just even have like an XML or a script to configure the Wi-Fi for you. That's something you don't want to do on a desktop, so you just want to set that up to just go to a laptop. That's one thing you can put in the task sequence to say, okay, this laptop, okay, here's your Wi-Fi signal and everything. Here's your settings for the corporate Wi-Fi, so it's all pre-set up for you.
Fantastic. That's great information, Jeff. So it really sounds like this goes back to the initial due diligence process that we have at the very beginning of the project. Get as much information as you can, understand how the environment's laid out, not for, obviously from a technical perspective, but more from a business perspective. You know, what groups are out there, what sort of applications they're running, where there's a commonality amongst all the groups. You know, hey, yeah, they're all going to Windows 10, but is there anything else that needs to be implemented that's going to be outside of, you know, Active Directory group policy, those types of things that can be pushed across each image. I think that's a great approach, Jeff. I'm going to shift gears slightly. Karen, I've got a project management question, so it's really more, I just need to understand kind of from a project management perspective, what do you think is one of the most critical steps to ensure that like the overall deployment is successful when you engage the customer?
Yeah, there's a few things that I think would be really key. One really important thing is building your team, making sure you identify all of your stakeholders, all of your technical resources, determine what their roles are in the project, make sure that you guys have a communication plan both internally within the team and externally with the end users, with any directors or managers that you can leverage to help communicate any kind of a rollout. But organization, obviously, as a project manager is key. And you want to make sure that you kind of thought through the process and the soft steps. So determining your schedule, and then how all of your stakeholders' tasks fall into that schedule. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing. I think Jeff touched on a lot of the technical things that you can organize ahead of time. And as far as that falls into the project plan, once you've determined the technical aspects, kind of assigning those out and scheduling those tasks.
All right, so what I'm hearing is it's obviously it's a joint effort between the customer and the project team, and ensuring that you have the key players within the project team. Now, as far as that's concerned, what have you been finding kind of, obviously I know each customer is different, but what have you are finding the most or the largest obstacle with the customers? Is it like communication effectiveness? Is it scheduling? What kind of examples have you been finding out there?
I think the actual rollout itself is really not all that complex. I think one of the biggest things is dealing mostly with state and local government. The end users are typically afraid of change. So I think communicating ahead of time and making sure that the end users know what's coming, where to go to get help, where to get more information, and sort of like easing that transition into the unknown, I think is another thing that can kind of help prepare.
So basically educating the end user is what I'm hearing. Is getting...
Yeah, educating them and just communicating with them. Everybody's afraid of change, so as comfortable as you can get your end users with change, I think the less impact there'll be to the support desk team in the long run after the actual rollout has been done.
All right, thanks for that, Karen. So since we're on the topic of training, Ryan, I know you've put together a whole slew of training materials that cover, from the administrator all the way down to the end user. I mean, can you maybe give me an example of some of the things that you touch on in the training and what you found to be kind of the biggest takeaway that end users get from your training?
Yeah, I mean, there's a myriad of things that it covers, and the main thing is just to get them familiar with the interface. So what I've put together is an interactive PowerPoint. So even though they don't already have it, they can go through and they can really experience some of the features that Windows 10 offers that they haven't had in previous platforms. So from the end user's perspective, the main thing is just to make sure that they get a good look at what they're getting and what they can expect.
Okay. And I know you deliver this in multiple different ways as far as whether it's one-on-one or group. What have you found to be the most effective in the different training scenarios you have? Is it something where you go on site and you have a large group, or is it kind of a train-to-trainer type scenario? What are you looking at?
The best thing that I've found is kind of been more speaking to administrators that can then evangelize from there. And so what I've put together is actually there's a 5-day Microsoft class that we've consolidated down to a 2-day class where we have administrators come in, help desk personnel as well, so that as they get questions they can address those with their end users and be able to work through them. So we kind of do a classroom format where we could have anywhere from 7 to 15 people, and in that class we just kind of do a deep dive into everything that they can look to expect from Windows 10 and to make sure that they're also familiar with it, because many of them have not worked with it extensively, at least from a troubleshooting perspective themselves yet.
Great, thanks for that, Ryan. Ryan, do you have any other words of advice around what a customer can prepare for as far as the training is concerned, or how you've engaged the customer from a technical and a knowledge transfer standpoint?
Well, for anybody who would be taking that class, is a marathon, really. I mean, and we've compacted so much into that 2-day course. What I've done is there is a very large PowerPoint that goes along with that, and so it's nice because we do go at a very fast pace, but they can then go back and review those items, and then additionally, as they hire on new people to the help desk, then they can, at the end of the class, the PowerPoint is theirs to keep, and it is 700 plus slides, so it's huge. But then they can train their incoming hires as well with that material, and it's something that has really proved to be useful in the onboarding process for new hires on help desks particularly.
Excellent, excellent. So another key takeaway from this that I'm hearing is ensuring that your user community, not necessarily all the way down to the end user unless it's a requirement, but the key personnel in the environment, help desk folks, the training department, as well as the administrators are fully knowledgeable on what to expect. So when the deployment does happen, if there's any troubleshooting that needs to occur, or hey, oops, this didn't install correctly, or hey, how do I find the start menu on Windows 10? They're at least going to be knowledgeable enough to help the end user out and get them trained up.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not so vastly different that troubleshooting is too much different on Windows 10. So if you have basic troubleshooting skills, with the tools that the class gives them, they should be well prepared to engage with their end users and help them to be successful.
I know a lot of the engagements you've been involved with are a shift from Windows 7 to Windows 10. Have you been finding that it's been a huge undertaking for the end users to adopt and understand the differences between Windows 7 and Windows 10? Obviously there's different users out there and the different skill levels, but I'm just kind of talking in general.
No, actually, from my experience, the user adoption has been a lot smoother actually than I would have anticipated. And again, it's not so vastly different that it can't be picked up, and maybe I've just been lucky in having pretty sharp clients, but it seems like the adoption has been pretty simple, and the help desk calls that we've been seeing coming in after Windows 10 has been implemented have been pretty nominal, and end users don't seem like they're lost when they're introduced to the new platform.
Excellent. That's good information. So I want to move forward a little bit here, and Corey, if you'd move to the next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about best practices, which really encompasses what you've been talking about, Ryan, the end user training preparation, the help desk training preparation, the admins, as well as Karen, what you were referring to about setting up the communication templates and ensuring that the project team is put together and that the customer and the project team are working, hand in hand to understand maintenance windows, those types of processes. And then Jeff, the actual configuration, the management, the deployment of it. So Jeff, I'm actually going to start with you. Do you have any specific best practices that you would tell an SCCM administrator you're doing, the two-in-the-box training and saying, hey, you need to really make sure, I understand you have had SCCM training, we've done operating system deployment, we've created these task sequences, but these are some of the things that you should really be doing that are specific to your environment, and feel free to use examples from, actual deployments. Oh, Jeff, I think you're muted.
Sorry, muted.
No problem.
Best things I recommend is make sure to get if they can possibly get all their applications in either a package, scripted install, or an application, so those can be deployed to task sequence. And they don't have to be put into a base image, so those can be put in, that should be one of the big first things you should be doing is make sure you have everything as a package or an application. Other recommendations is not to do too many changes at once. So let's say you're currently at, let's say, Windows 7 and Office 2010. Well, don't push out Windows 10 and Office 365 at the same time. Things like that could be too much change for an end user. Then what's really causing a problem? Is it the Office 365 or was it the Windows 10? So easier to keep your change to a minimum and try and keep it operating system and your current install base, and then if there's an upgrade later, come by and do a second upgrade for that. Other thing recommended is when we're talking about drivers, make sure you test every model device you have in your environment, not just one or two, but just every model, because we can always run into one. We ran into one model where I came in and they couldn't get the driver to work, and they were using the USB to plug it in for network connectivity. I found the right driver, got it installed, and they were back online working with that model. So things along that line. Make sure you got all your models set up, so you make sure you got to test every model to work properly with your task sequence to make sure it does go through.
So again, it sounds like, again, don't introduce too much in your environment. Don't make too many changes at one time. So if you're working on going from Windows 7 to Windows 10, do that first. And then, hey, by the way, we're going to move to Office 365 too. At a project that comes in after the fact, when it's possible. It's less about the technical aspects of it, of actually performing the upgrade, but more from end user adoption and ensuring that you're not throwing too much at it at once. Obviously, if you have a user environment where they're more resilient, they understand, or it's a smaller organization where the support channels are direct and it's going to have less of an impact, then that might be an okay solution by doing that full lift and shift into the new OS, the new applications, the whole 9 yards on that one. But the larger organizations obviously take small, well-planned steps. So Karen, that kind of brings me back to you about, I know you were touching on end-user communication. Are there any best practices that you have around that with dealing with the customer, creating communication templates, anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. One theme that I know Travis and Jeff have been touching on that I think carries over into project management and communications is don't rewrite the wheel when you're communicating to your end users. I know it's an exciting change and you want to get your end users excited about it. So you want to leverage media that your end users are already used to seeing. So if you have an intranet, maybe putting a banner ad in your intranet announcing the change that is coming. Maybe print material if your end users are really used to seeing, paper on, the elevator or in the lobbies or, on their cubicle or something. Definitely feel free to use print media. Email is a great way, of course, to communicate things. I think one thing about email, especially coming from support desk, is your end users are used to seeing communication from the support desk. So you want it to be consistent with the typical communication that you send out to your end users, but at the same time you want it to catch their attention. You don't want it to look like another outage window or maintenance thing, that, I know some end users actually have rules where they just put that into, a folder and don't read them. So you do want to, change up the subject line so it catches their attention and maybe doesn't get caught by some of the rules that they've got in place. And send out more than one email, make it kind of annoying so that maybe by the fourth email they're like, oh wait, maybe I should actually read this and see what's going to happen. There are some great links that Microsoft has posted to kind of get the customer used to it if they are curious and want to kind of do a test run and see what's out there to take a look. Again, I guess video, some people do actual videos and broadcast them out to their end users too. So again, make it fun, make it exciting, but you don't want to make it look like, Microsoft spam either. So just a few tips, but do what's worked for you in the past as well. Again, like, it's a common theme. Don't rewrite the wheel. Don't shock your end users. So.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks for that, Karen. And I'm going to summarize what you said. If I'm hearing it correctly, you're saying over-communicate with your end user, but don't make it so much that it's yuck. What is this? This is another spam email coming from the help desk. And as you said, they set up a rule where it goes to clutter, or they just delete it. Whatever the case may be. So, but also use different formats, put the flyers in the elevator and on the stairs and, at everyone's desk. That way they're at least aware of what's happening. Hey, we're going from Windows 7 to Windows 10. They might not know what that means, but at least they're aware of it, and then, provide links to training. If you have an intranet, you can post all the information up there, if there's videos that go along with that, because I know like here at Planet we do a lot of custom videos for training that will show the end user, hey, this is what you expect when you go from Windows 7 to Windows 10, or you're upgrading from Office 2010 to Office 2016. You know, those types of self-guided tutorials.
Yep. Exactly.
One of the things that I've run into as well, and you can never do this too much. You can never prepare too much. 95% preparation, 5% execution. Ensure that everyone on your team and in your environment understands what's going on, and then you have executive buy-off. You really need this to be kind of a top-down support for the project. You don't want some, just IT driving this, because then you're going to have a lot of folks that don't want to have end-user adoption. Yeah, those types of issues, I've run into where it's very isolated, and they're kind of, putting their thumb down and saying, you're going to have Windows 10. I don't care, regardless of what's going on in the environment. And then you have problems with application compatibility, or not every department is participating as you need to have full support of this project. So again, prepare. I know one of the things that my team does, all the folks here on the call, and we have some additional folks that are not on this, but one of the things we do is it's pre-tech planning, and we use what we call a maintenance work plan, and this goes through, and it's a very documented process of who's involved in the project, what are we doing, the tasks that are associated with this, when are those tasks supposed to occur, and then the sequence of those tasks that are occurring within that maintenance window. If anything goes wrong, there's an escalation process, and all the folks that are involved with it, who's the first point of contact, the second point of contact. If you don't get a hold of them through email, phone, text, whatever the case may be, who's where does the buck stop with this person, so that you can ensure that if there is an escalation, oops, we pushed out the OS at the wrong time, or someone flipped the wrong switch, and it caused an application to be pushed out that wasn't supposed to be pushed out. Who do we call to ensure that that's getting remediated correctly, and what can we do to prevent that? Also, as I've said before, we do a postmortem to every project, but typically we do a postmortem for every phase as well. What went well with that iteration? What went wrong with it? What can we do to ensure that it works better the next time that we're getting pushed out? So from that postmortem, obviously, Corey, if you can go to the next slide, please. We're going to go to lessons learned. And really with this is all postmortem. These are the things that we've learned at Planet. Jeff and Ryan and Karen, the things where we go in eyes wide open. We're expecting ABC 1, 2, 3, but it doesn't always pan out like that. So we learn things kind of on the fly, and based off of that, we've created a huge lessons learned list. So, Jeff, what are some of the lessons learned that you would push forward? I know you talked about best practices, but I know you talked about the 8021X, but what would you change, or what would you consider a lessons learned on an issue that you ran into? Anything like, say, maybe with licensing server, or any best practices around that? Jeff, can you hear me? Okay, well, let's go ahead and switch on that one. Ryan, how about you? Any lessons learned that you can think of that you want to share with the folks out there?
Yeah, one of the things that we really ran into on the deployment that I'm currently working on is they just use primarily Mac keys for their Office activation, and KMS is a lot easier when you're doing these, but the one that we're doing is an in-place upgrade. So we had a lot of challenges importing the Mac keys to activate Office, because it just did not work how you would expect in the in-place upgrade scenario. So that kind of speaks to Jeff's point of packaging Office and things of that nature as a post task rather than trying to do an in-place install, because there are additional challenges that you are going to face with that. But with that being said, I mean, we had to come up with a little bit of a creative solution, but I haven't encountered anything yet that with enough out-of-the-box thinking that we haven't been able to overcome the challenges that we've been presented with.
All right. Thanks for that, Ryan. Jeff, do we have you back yet?
Yeah, I lost connectivity.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So,
for a second.
Yeah, we were touching on lessons learned there, and Ryan was talking about the key management service, licensing, Mac versus volume licensing, those types of scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any lessons learned that you want to share with the folks on the call?
Specifically with that, or
with anything in general?
With your KMS server, there is some updates you have to put in and make sure. I know I ran into one customer. They thought they downloaded the right license key, and it turned out they were downloading the wrong one and applying it to their KMS server. I ran into those types of issues that we've learned along the line. The 802.1x one was a big eye-opener to me because it worked with previous versions of Windows PE and now it doesn't. So that was one of the big one that came up for me, was that one. So.
And 802.1x, I don't think you mentioned it, but it sounds like it's not officially supported by Microsoft, even though you can get it to work. Is that a true case? Okay.
Yes, it's officially not supported. Supposedly there's a bug, but I haven't heard anything about them trying to put in a fix for it yet. So.
Okay. All right. Any other lessons learned you want to share with us, like using scripts to customize desktops? Anywhere you can direct anyone as far as lessons learned, or any knowledge base articles that you want to share?
There's a couple ways you can do some of the things, like even like the new start layout in Windows 10. You could do it through group policy, or you could do it through the actual OSD process and apply your start layout that way. Either way is acceptable. If you do it through group policy, end users aren't able to change it later on. If you do it through OSD, this allows your end users to be empowered to change their start layout later. Same thing with applying for default programs, which you use to change from Edge to the Internet Explorer browser. If you do that through OSD, end users can make changes down the line. If you do it through group policy, it's going to be set, and they're not going to be able to change it. So you have to learn from the beginning what do you want your end users to change and what you don't want them to change. And that'll basically decide what you put in group policy and what you do through OSD.
Great. That's good information, Jeff. Thanks for that. So as far as lessons learned, some other pieces that you want to put out there, and Karen, you can definitely add on to this, but when you're planning with the customer and you're creating, the project timelines, ensure that you're creating realistic timeline goals. It's, again, that breaks down to understanding what is really in the customer environment, who's going to be upgraded, when they're going to be upgraded, any interdependencies that that department may have with another one, or we have to do this version of workstation first, and then we're going to switch gears and move to this laptop. Whatever it is that you're deploying in the environment, you just need to ensure that you create realistic timelines, because it's one of these where you might think, oh, we can do 500 workstations a night, and technically you could be able to, but then you have to think about all the processes or all the fallout that may occur if anything goes wrong the next day. Do you have the support staff to be able to handle the support calls of 500 owners of those workstations during the next day? Or is it more realistic to say we're going to do 50 a night or 25 a night and just spread the migration out longer? Those are some of the things that you should really take into account with that. Karen, did you have anything to add to that?
Not necessarily. I think you pretty much covered it. This is a project like any other project. So just make sure that you've got your timelines organized and you've identified all of the key stakeholders.
Thanks. Now, another piece that I always like to have, again, being an old school sysadmin, how are we going to roll back? Whether it's an individual user or an entire iteration, what do we need to roll back from Windows 10 to Windows 7 or Windows 8 or 8.1 or whatever OS you're going back to, and still preserve that data? So you need to ensure that you have some sort of rollback plan, contingency in place, and tested and proofed, and ensuring that it does work. Because the biggest thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to lose end user data. So ensuring you have backups. If you're doing profile migrations, ensure that your USMT process works, or if you're putting their profiles onto home shares, ensure that they have that access. You know, even if it's one of these where you give them temporary access to that profile and they have to you know, work on a Windows 10 workstation, but they access all of the profiles separately before you can reload the workstation. You know, whatever the case may be, ensure that you have some sort of contingency in place to ensure that they do not lose their data. If they lose their data, I mean, it's game over for you. It's less about the workstation itself and the functionality of it, but it's ensuring that your users can continue to function with their information. All right, does anyone on the panel have any additional comments or lessons learned they want to share with anyone? Karen, anything additional?
Nothing that jumps out at me. I know we're running a little bit short on time, so I'd like to give the people out there enough time to ask some questions if they have any.
Okay. All right, well, we can open it up to questions. So I see one out there that says, will we be able to access a recorded copy of this meeting for others in our organization? Yes, you will. I believe this is going to be posted. There's going to be a follow-up email that'll be sent out that'll have the link to the recorded session. Any other questions out there?
Don't be shy. Type them in the window.
All right. Well, what we can do is, you know, we'll go ahead and we'll just watch, and we'll stay on the line for a few more minutes. But Corey, I'll go ahead and I'll turn it back over to you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Travis. Like Travis said, there will be an email follow-up for those of you that are attending, and for those that weren't able to attend, that will have a link to the recorded session on Planet's YouTube channel. We hope you enjoyed the session. Hope that you got something out of it. You can visit a couple of our websites at goplanet.com, which gives you company information and contact information and access to all of us. And check out o365support.com to get your free trial of how to support. Thank you, everyone. Have a great 4th of July weekend.